Hey there, today we're going to go through the rebranding process that I did with my client Evenbreak. I'm going to show you the stages that I go through when I'm creating a new logo, some of the brand strategy, mock-ups, and the final deliverables which I give to the client. I thought this would be an interesting overview for anyone who is thinking about having a brand created or going through a rebranding process themselves. It's quite in-depth, so you might want to grab a coffee before you watch the video, but I'm sure you're going to find this really, really interesting. So let's get stuck in and let's take a look at some of the materials that Evenbreak had when they came to see me. So you can see here, this is a selection of some of the marketing materials that Evenbreak had, and if your impression is the same as mine when they first came to speak to me, I found it very muted, lots of bluey greys mixed throughout the materials. And being honest as well, you know, the design of the materials wasn't the best, but there was consistency there, and you know, that's one thing which I'm always talking about, is having consistency with your branding and your marketing material. So there was definitely consistency using the logo and using the colors. But once I got to know the client, we have an initial discovery call where I find out why the client wants to do a rebrand and just more about them and more about the company. And what they do, you know, is something special. You know, they help disabled people find jobs with employers who value those candidates. You know, they're looking specifically for people with disabilities to fill positions within their companies. You know, they are inclusive and they understand that, you know, just because someone has a disability does not mean that they can be great at a specific job in whatever field or industry that is. And so considering, you know, how I would say that what they do is fairly, you know, fairly life-changing. I found the materials a little bit on this, I suppose, the safe side. It wasn't, and it didn't really inspire me, you know. So if I'm looking for a job and wanting to kind of improve my own life and you know, see more positivity, I felt the materials which you see on screen here, you know, the materials are really corporate looking. You know, they're aimed at the corporate side. Now, the thing to mention with Evenbreak is that the businesses pay to advertise their jobs on the Evenbreak jobs board. Now, the Evenbreak jobs board is pretty good. It's AAA access, meaning that, you know, it's fully accessible on pretty much all sorts of technology, and that's something that's just quite hard to get. You know, that sort of AAA accessibility, and so something for them to be proud of. And that obviously attracts the corporate side who want to make sure that their job adverts are going in the right place. So that's great, you know, and I could see why Evenbreak were branding themselves in the way that they had, because if the corporates are paying the money, then obviously you need to look to the corporates. But what about the candidates? What about the people who are applying for the job? Should they not be going to the Evenbreak website or, you know, seeing Evenbreak's materials and being inspired and seeing lots of positivity? You know, what was missing for me was there are photographs in the materials, but again, they just seem so corporate and staged. I think, you know, there's many of us who really can't stand certain types of stock photography, which is very, very staged. and, kind of fake smiles and all of that stuff. And I got that feeling from the materials. And so that was one of the things which, I was like, right, okay, we need to change this. What we need to do is we need to bring brighter photography into this and bring in some, some brighter colors. And, in no uncertain terms, my client Jane, whose company it is, was a bit nervous about that, and that's understandable because you don't want to kind of take the risk of turning away the people who are paying, that keep your, they're the ones that are keeping the lights on, so to speak. So it was a big move for, for me to suggest, a change of color and things like that. So one of the first things that was clear that we needed to do was we needed to have a brand strategy day. And so what we did was myself and Jane and her team, we all met up in Glasgow for a full day, and we thrashed out some of the strategy elements for the brand. And one of the first things which I do, especially if it's a team of people, because it's important that everyone is on the same page, is I get everyone to write down their values, their core values, what makes them tick. And there's an interesting mix of values, but there was definite crossovers between everyone. And that was really, really good to see. It would have been a miracle if everyone had exactly the same core values. But they didn't, because we're all kind of people, and we all have, we've all been brought up differently and different experiences, but there are certain crossovers that you can have. If you all have the same goal working in a business, then generally you will have similar values that are in the same area. And I found that was the case with the guys who work at Evenbreak. And some of the other things that we did were, I have a very simple worksheet that we go through that looks at their USP, what makes them different to the other companies that they're competing with. What are the company's core values? So everyone's got their own individual values, but what should the company's core values be? What problems are we solving? Some adjectives which define them and describe, your perfect customer, what your buyer personas. And we also look at our competitors and, what do they do well? What does Evenbreak do better? And we also have a list of priorities, and we look at brand positioning statements. It's a busy, busy day, but it gives me a lot of great information to go away with when it comes to the point of working on the rebrand and creating the logo and the marketing materials that will support, and sit on the brand strategy that we work out. So by the end of the day, we had kind of a first draft of our values, and we had a first draft of the brand positioning. Now with Evenbreak, they're serving two distinct different types. They have the candidates who are applying for the jobs, and then you have the employers who are advertising the jobs. So we had two slightly different brand positioning statements that we were working on for each of those areas. It was really, really useful. Really, really useful to do. And by the end of the day, I was exhausted. I'm pretty sure they were exhausted, but everyone was really excited. And that's the main thing for me, is if everyone's excited, it means we're on the right path, and it means that everyone is going to be all in on the rebranding process. And I know that everyone was nervous about it. This was a big, big move. Evenbreak had been around, I think, for about 8 years and had the same branding for 8 years. And so they've got this guy coming in, big beard, baseball cap, who's basically saying, right, we need to change things. If we want to appeal to the candidates and also appeal to the corporates, then I think I know a way to do that. But for me, I know that the corporates pay the money, but for me, the candidates were the ones, the people applying for the jobs were the most important element, because if the employers are paying for the jobs but no one is applying for the jobs, then they're wasting their money. And so for me, I felt that we needed to attract more people to Evenbreak to apply for those jobs. And to do that, we needed a brighter, more positive looking brand. And that was what I was going into the strategy day with. And, it was really cool. So it all turned out really, really well. I was very pleased with how the day went. There was a lot to sift through, and the whole team, worked really well together, and everyone took specific little tasks away and worked on those for me. And then obviously the next thing to do was to then move into the logo. And this was the existing logo design. As you can see here, it consists of this kind of, it's like 3D blocks. And there were two different versions, one for when the logo was on white and one for when the logo, when the logo was on a dark background, and one for when the logo was on a light background. And they had this white text here with this drop shadow. Not the best. Now, the symbol that they had, Jane really liked it, and she really liked her colours, this sort of teal blue, with the different sort of shades and tints of teal blue. And she liked it. And she, was like, well, she was happy with it. And so my job then was to sort of convince Jane to change, to move to something else. So there was a task there for me to make sure that everything I did was to improve and help Evenbreak as a brand get more awareness and attract more candidates, which would then hopefully attract more people to advertise their jobs. Okay, so first thing I do is I start doing some sketches, which are just, this is a fraction of the sketches which I do, just looking at everything. Doesn't matter if I think this is actually quite terrible, I will sketch it down, because sometimes what's terrible in your head, when you put it down, it can lead to avenues of other ideas, and also ideas which you have in your head which you think are amazing, when you get them down on paper, they turn out to not be so great. So I do a lot of sketching, a lot of thinking, and one of the things which I'm doing when I'm working on rebrands is I do like to have, if I can, have the rebrand sort of as an evolution rather than a revolution. But that will depend on the reason for the rebrand. If the reason for a rebrand is because something's went badly wrong and the brand needs to distance itself, then sometimes that's a revolution and you need to make the brand look very different. But if the brand is just sort of needing to move forward and kind of make things a bit better, that's often for me an evolution of the brand. And I like to bring something from the brand which gives a continuance for the existing customers, and in Evenbreak's case, the candidates and the corporates. It's something that they can recognize that it's Evenbreak, even though it may look slightly different or a lot different depending on how we get there. And I knew that Jane really liked the teal blue color, and she liked her logo. She didn't dislike it, the old logo. So my first approach was, okay, what can I do with the existing logo? Can I just refresh this in a way to, that will help? One of the first things for the logo that when I first looked at it, for me, it looked like it was pointing backwards. These looked like 3 blocks pointing over to the left. Now, depending on how you look at this, if you look at it long enough, it's one of those kind of optical illusion ones. It could look like these 2 blocks here are the base, and this one is stacked on top, and it's actually pointing up here. But for me, these two blocks were the base, and this one was stacked on top of these two, and it was pointing this way. And I think it was more kind of, this is kind of where the point was for me here. But the more you look at it, you know, your eyes start to go a bit funny. So I thought, okay, let's see if I can do something with this where we have this arrow type shape, and I point it the right way. So I point it from left to right, so there's forward momentum. And it was okay, you know, it was okay. It introduced a bit of space to the logo, you know, it wasn't so heavy, but it wasn't really doing anything for me that much. So I moved on from that and started to think about, you know, what else could we do here? You know, so we've got Evenbreak, we've got the employer, we've got the candidate, you know, so which is, you know, the three together is the perfect match and the perfect solution. So started thinking about the power of threes. How could I use the elements of the existing logo in ways, you know, that would come together? So these cubes kept coming up. And then I was like, okay, so let's try some different shapes. Let's, you know, try some circles. Let's try triangles. Let's try some ovals. I'll try anything just to see what's there. And it seems a bit aimless. And sometimes it is, because sometimes you have to just let your mind and your brain just relax almost and just see what comes from it. And this kind of, you know, I liked this sort of shape here down at the bottom. Once, you know, I kind of liked what was happening here. It was interesting to me. And you can see here, I'm still sort of in the one above. It's like trying bright colors, and we'll kind of get to that later. Here I was sticking to the teals and the different shades of the teal that we had there. But I was like, by the time I got to the end of this, I was like, this is not working properly for me. And then, so I went back to my sketches and I had a look at my sketches again. I got a little bit thinking, and there was one bit that kind of popped out at me, and I thought, I'm gonna give that a go. And it was this sketch here, where I basically took the logo and I plotted points on where all the lines kind of intersected. And I'd start to draw, you know, joining the dots basically. And so I did that, took it into Illustrator and did that, and I started to join the dots to see what different shapes I could get from this logo. And I started to see things in there, and I was like, okay, this is getting, you know, this may be going somewhere. I might be able to do something with this. And so I played around with it a little bit longer, and started to kind of see that I could actually make a letter from here, from this. I was like, okay, let's try, you know, to Evenbreak. Let's do an E from this. And so looked at the dots and joined them up and tried to, you know, start to create an E, and tried out different shadings and things like that. And I was like, this isn't looking like an E to me. It's too much like a letter C. I think many people would see that as a C rather than an E. I'm going to go back to the dots and see if I can make this look more like an E than a C. And it was just a very simple change that I had to make. And it was to take one section out up here in this corner, in this edge, and just push it in. And it instantly looked more like an E and less like a C. And I really started to like this shape. So I took that forward and started to play around with this shape and started adding in different shading, you know, still working with the original logo almost, and having these kind of 3D sections or angled sections and seeing what I could do with that. And when I started playing with the sections in the middle, I was like, okay, this is starting to look like a 3D sort of folded effect. You know, like origami paper or something like that. So I could bring some depth back into the logo, because the 3D one obviously had this depth. And I thought I could bring depth into this as well by some color or shading. And so I kind of kept going and started to introduce some, let's zoom in here, some slight shadowing in here to make it look like these sections were sitting above the ones in the middle. And by doing that, what that then gave me was a more distinctive arrow shape as well, pointing left to right. So I was now getting an E for Evenbreak, but I was able to bring in this arrow and forward momentum element that I wanted to represent the candidate's journey of applying for the job, going for interview, getting the job, you know, their journey into employment. And so I started to get a little bit excited about that. And it was one of those ones where it's like, okay, this is probably the concept. This is the one which I'm going to take forward and work on. And so I started to round off a lot of the sharp edges to soften it a little bit. I felt that the brand needed a little bit of softness because the whole team are amazing that work at Evenbreak. They're such people. You know, they're all they want to do is help. And so for me, the brand needed a little bit of softness around the logo to show that side of things. And by the time I got to the last sort of option, this one down here, I was pretty much happy with how that was looking. This was the final shape for me for the icon for Evenbreak. All in the teal color, which Jane really liked, but it needed something. It needed a splash of color. It needed some accent color to give that brightness and a bit of punch to the logo. But before I did that, one of the things which I need to make sure as well is that the logo can actually still be recognizable in one color. Usually I would be designing everything in black when I start, but because I knew I wanted to bring this teal color through, I actually have been working in this one in using this color. But normally I would do it all in black, because then I can focus on the shape and make sure that it's that you can replicate it in one color. And so what I had to do with this one was I had to introduce some white lines, which would kind of replace sort of like the 3D elements. Otherwise, I mean, it still looks like an E, all in, you know, if I remove these lines, then you still have that E shape. But I really liked the idea of still being able to see this arrow element with the segments as well. And so to do that, I just introduced some lines to that, and I felt that was quite effective as well, because it keeps the uniqueness of that logo shape, of that symbol or icon, in just one color. And here as well, this is it in grayscale. So I knew that I could proceed fully because it worked flat. Didn't require the drop shadows for it to work fully with me. I could do it in one color. The next thing to look at was the typography. I wanted something which looked, you know, fairly modern. So I was kind of looking at a few. My initial choice was EXO 2, but when I discussed that with the client, they felt that it was maybe a little bit too rounded, and in the end we went for it's either Ubuntu or Ubuntu, and this is the one that we went with because it had the roundness that I wanted, but some sharp elements as well. The same as the logo. You know, we've got some sharp points, but we've got this roundedness here, and Ubuntu kind of filled the gap for that. And so this was the icon sitting with the text. The old logo was all lowercase, and for me, I need a good reason to go all lowercase, and I didn't feel that there was one here for that, and so I wanted to go with a leading capital. It just brings in I just think it's, you know, just grammatically it's correct, but I think for me it felt better because it helped emphasize, you know, that this was an E. I didn't want if I'm using this symbol and that was a lowercase, I didn't want it to look like we were trying to do double E at the start of Evenbreak. Want to make sure that people would see this as a symbol, and then this is the full, you know, the name of the brand. So the next thing to look at then was the colors. One of the things that I do for that is I will look at all the competitors and look at the colors that they have. And one of the ways I do that is I usually go to their website and I will pick out a color palette, and I'll put a little color palette. You can see down here in the right hand bottom corner of this page, I've got a 3 square color palette, and I did that for all of the people that we thought, for all of the companies that we thought were competitors, and included Evenbreak. This was their website at the time, and just went through them all and picked out the colors. And these were the color palettes, and you can see here that, you know, they generally all have a color you could use as an accent color for buttons and things like that, whereas Evenbreak were very much on this teal blue. No real color, no accent color that could, you know, there wasn't one there that could give that punch, or, you know, just that to emphasize something or highlight something. And I needed to bring something in there for the brand to do that. This was all the logos of the companies that we looked at, and just kind of looking at where the old Evenbreak logo sat with all of that. And so that was, you know, where we went to with color and did my little bit of research into that. So here we are here. So these are competitor colors and then Evenbreak. So what I did was I went to the Adobe Color website. And this is kind of one of my go-to sites when I'm looking to create a color palette, whether that be a triad one as we see here, or, you know, complementary. It's a great website for quickly letting you see where things are on the color wheel and, you know, where they should all match up. So when I put in the teal for Evenbreak, it started to bring up magentas and yellows, and I was like, okay, that's really interesting, because earlier on when I was using colors in the process, I was using magenta and yellow. It was just the colors for me which kind of helped kind of spark things. So it was almost a vindication when I saw that on the Adobe Color site. I was like, okay, I'm going to run with this then. I did try more of a red, but it didn't work. It didn't really gel. It was too fiery. Didn't really work for the brand, but I felt that the magenta and the yellow really gave that pop. And eventually these were the chosen colors that I went with. Over here we have, these are Pantone spot colors. And then over here on the right, these are the CMYK versions, so they're pretty close. One of the things when I'm choosing color is that I start with CMYK most of the time. And the reason for that is that if you start with Pantone or RGB, Pantone colors and RGB colors, you can get really bright colors, neons and just really super bright colors. But the CMYK printing process can't replicate a lot of those really bright colors. And so if you choose your colors in RGB, but 99% of the time when you get your items printed, they're printed as CMYK, you're going to get a bit of a shock when your really bright orange comes out muddy brown. So for me, I start with CMYK and then I will choose a Pantone spot color, which is quite close. You won't always get a perfect match, but you can get it quite close. Now, the only time where I would choose Pantone or RGB to start with is that if the job was going to be digital only going to be on screen. There's no need for printing. That way, you can go as bright as you want. But if it's going to be, anything's going to be printed and you don't want to spend a lot of money having to use, CMYK plus a spot color to make sure, or spot colors, plural, to make sure your logo colors are correct, which is expensive, then for me, doing the CMYK thing is the way to do it. And so this is where I implemented that yellow and magenta into the forward part of that arrow, and which, kind of runs from left to right and kind of points into the word Evenbreak. And I was really happy with this, really, really happy, and was ready to, pretty much ready to present this to the client. One of the things as well, which I needed to, which I brought in, was when we were doing the strategy workshop, the existing tagline, which was on the website, was helping talented disabled candidates and inclusive employers to find each other. Now that's exactly what Evenbreak do. That's exactly what they do, but it's a bit of a mouthful and a lot to say. So towards the end of the strategy day, we're kind of throwing things around, seeing how we can shorten that down. And out of that came the tagline of talent first, which essentially covers all of this and can reflect both sides, both areas of business for Evenbreak. For the candidates, talent first. They know that the companies which are advertising on Evenbreak are looking for talent before they're looking at disability. And for the corporates, when they're advertising, same thing. They're looking for the talented people. The people that they want are going to have the right talents, and they know that there are people out there who have disabilities who have that talent. And they're saying by advertising their jobs on Evenbreak that they're looking for talent first. It was just one of those things that was like, this is brilliant, because it's really hard to get a tagline which is super short, something which could be used as a hashtag as well. So we were really, really pleased with that. And one of the things, the next thing I do before I present to the client is I will create some mock-ups just showing the logo in different placements, because not everyone is like designers. If I design a logo, I can look at it on a white page and know in my head I can visualize where that logo will be on the side of a bus, on a poster, on a mug, on a keyring, on a t-shirt. It's just there. It's all there. I can see it. But a lot of clients can't do that. And so if you just present a logo on a white page, they quite often do not get excited by it. they'll be like, yeah, it's okay. But if you can show them how it can be used, the excitement builds and they can see how it works. So what I do is I show the logo in different places. Business card, side of a bus, billboard, poster. If you notice here, I've got this funny shape with the photograph inside it. And that actually comes from back here in the process where I had this thing, this shape here, which I really liked. And I thought, okay, as I was creating the mock-ups, I was needing some sort of frame to hold photographs. I thought that's quite good. And then I introduced the colors into it as well. And it just seemed to work. And so the next stage for me was to present my logo to the client, knowing the whole time that Jane, liked her existing branding. So I was, it was my job to show how this was going to be better. It's always interesting going through the presentation process because you don't know. Sometimes you can't tell, the client's got a poker face on and you can't tell what they're going to say when you get to the end. And Jane was very honest with me when we got to the end, and she said, I came onto this call, not sure if I can't remember what she said exactly, but, it was kind of along the lines of, you were going to have to convince me that this was the right thing to do. I wrote this down as she said it, just after she said it on the call. And Jane had said, I am the hardest person in the world to convince, and you've done it. I love it. And Cass, who also works with Jane, was on the call, and Cass got a little bit teary about it. She was very, very happy with what I'd come up with. And so for me, that was the best outcome I could have ever asked for, was, that Jane loved it. And I could obviously see that Cass was emotional over it, in that she felt, she'd be able to work with this new brand and show Evenbreak off in a more positive light, less corporate, but at the same time, corporate enough, and the corporates would get on board with the positivity. Because corporates are run by people too. They're not just, we see them as faceless organizations, but there are real people behind that. And I know that Jane and the team have really good relationships with the people in those businesses. And so it's important that, that they still talk to the corporates like people as well. So that was pretty much it. And I got sign off on that to move ahead. Started to create some marketing materials. So I created stationery designs, a leaflet, which you may have remember from earlier on, which was the which was all blue, all teal blue. I redid that one, brought in a bit more white space, used the arrow elements, used the new frame for the photograph, and just kind of tidied it up and made things just look brighter and fresher. We created some little cards, business-sized cards, that the team could give out at events, which just, got across very quickly what Evenbreak do and who they are. Something which I felt was really important, because up to that point they had bigger leaflets and, flyers and things, but people lose those. Whereas with a business card sized one, they could put it in their pocket, they could put it in their bag or their purse or their wallet, and keep hold of it. This is the same card again. Redid the rate card so it was easier to read, better laid out, and a couple of roller banners because they attend a lot of events. And you can see here that I've used that frame with the photographs quite heavily on there, and this one has different text. So we still use the old tagline, but in areas where it's more suitable, where, you know, having more text makes sense. But we, you know, you can see here with the logo, we still use the talent first alongside with it. Yeah, it all, you know, we looked at new photography. Hopefully it didn't look too cheesy. Evenbreak, Jane and the team are going to be getting their own photography done, so it's unique to them, and they can set up and art direct the photographs they need. But we've managed to find some which weren't as cheesy, a little bit less staged looking, I suppose, but it's never going to be perfect. But it really helped to lift the brand, and you know, so it was such a great project to work on. I love working on projects where, you know, it's not, the end goal isn't about money. The end goal is enriching people's lives and making, you know, that's the end result. There's such a big change for the people at the end of it. And that's really rewarding to me, to know that I've been able to play a part in something that, you know, is making a difference, and that really, really is important to me. To take, you know, to take a brand from something which is very corporate and blue, you know, all the way through to something which, you know, is a lot brighter, and just gives a lot more of a positive feel and a vibe to it. And one thing which I haven't mentioned actually as well is that I also did a bit with their website. So their old website again was really dark and blue, and I redid the homepage design to bring in a lot of the colors and just lighten it up, to again just give that freshness to the site, so that when people go to the site it feels more inviting and feels less corporate. And yeah, for me it was a job well done. So I hope you find that interesting. I know it was quite a long video today, but there's a lot to go through, and I've probably skipped elements of that as well, just because there's so much goes into the process. You know, there's multiple meetings and back and forth, making sure things are on the right path. But what you've seen today is a glimpse of that process that I went through with Evenbreak, and I would love to do more of these for other clients to show you how my brain works when I'm trying to get from position A, which is the existing brand, to position B, which is the final rebrand and where I've taken the whole brand to. So if you have enjoyed the video and you found it useful, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and when you do, click the little bell icon, because what that will do is that will send you a notification whenever I upload a new video. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comment section and I will make sure I answer them. And until I see you next time, stay creative, folks.